Good afternoon. My name is Christy Wake from the Center for Faculty Excellence, and this is Leadership, Public Speaking, and Why They're Connected. Our presenters are Dr. Bruce Reagan and Dr. Sri Banerjee. And I'll go ahead and pass things over to Dr. Sri Banerjee to get things started.
Thank you, Christy. So today we will be talking about leadership skills and how communication skills are critical for leadership. One of the critical elements of communication is nonverbal communication. Of course, the content and what you are communicating about is important, but just as important, if not more important, is the nonverbal communication element of that. So I want to start off by asking you a question. Think about a leader that you really admire. What are some of the effective communication skills that they possess? Take a moment to think about that. And so as we present here in this slide, the importance of soft people skills and non-verbal communication skills are extremely important. In fact, a lot of business owners have been displeased with how recent graduates' abilities are when it comes to some of these soft skills that we will be talking about. Actually, one study found that 75% of long-term job success depends on people skills, while only 25% is dependent on technical skills. So we actually completed, Bruce and I completed a multi-year project, research project with a grant that was brought in from Walden University, taking a look at what types of skills were important with leadership skills. And as it turned out, through a multiple regression model, we found that it's important to have a global mindset. So one of the critical ways that a global mindset can be cultivated is through having adequate and efficient nonverbal communication skills. If you think about some of the more important leadership skills that are praised out there, one of those are having an authoritative style of leadership. These individuals are considered visionary, they're confident leaders, and they tend to lift the fog for people during times of uncertainty. And surely enough, currently we are going through one of those times of uncertainty as it pertains to the pandemic. So these types of skills are especially important right now. Next slide, please. This slide delves more into additional research. Alan Pease, an Australian well-renowned body language expert, found in his studies on communication that in a negotiation table, about 60 to 80% of what is communicated is through body language. Now, take a moment to observe that. 60 to 80% is being communicated just through body language. So to add to that, another individual, Albert Mehrabian from UCLA, found that in any communication scenario, 7% of information received is through the words spoken, 38% through the tone of voice, and 55% is just through bodily movements. Next slide, please. So this slide actually goes through a diagrammatic approach of understanding nonverbal communication in a more systematic manner. So we can start off with kinesics, gestures, postures, of course, facial expressions, haptics, use of touch, proxemics, use of space, so distancing from an individual or in a crowd, distancing from the crowd. When you're talking about things that may be a little bit more appealing to the audience. You might walk a bit closer to the audience. Some other elements you might talk further away. Chronemics in terms of use of time. And of course, fundamentally, appearance and dress matters. And some paralinguistic cues, for instance, tone, rate of speaking. And of course, Bruce will be going over a little bit in more detail about how you can effectively use some of these skills. Next slide, please. So this is going a little bit more in depth into one of these nonverbal cues, which is kinesics. So defensive stand position might not be the most effective way to create an open stance. Closed body, closed attitude, these types of things really does not make well for effective communication. Having an open attitude, open body language, this goes much further in being able to communicate effectively. So that next slide is for Bruce to take over now.
Thanks, Sri. Hi, folks. We're going to start taking a look now at a little bit more of the specifics in this process of communicating nonverbally. And as academicians, we live by the idea that content is king. But really, is it? And one of the things that we want to talk about here in our presentation today is that the content does have a very important role to play, obviously. But the one thing that we know is that a relatively small amount of knowledge is all that's needed to make a decision. And the more that we pour on does not improve the process for a better decision. So the question that we always have, though, is how do you know that you've met that minimum requirement in the information that you're providing? And is the information you're providing the key for that minimum? But irrespective of that, we have to take a look at these other pieces if we really do want to be effective communicators, and especially in the public speaking realm. Now, we've had some questions in the past about, well, what do I do if I'm in a webinar? What do I do if I'm in this particular situation where I'm on a screen and I'm doing a presentation rather than being in an area where I can physically move around? And we'll talk about some of those issues minimally tonight, but they are key parts of this. So what do we want to do is we want to take a look at the keys to a successful presentation. And the first thing we want to talk about is what we call vocal variety. Now, you know vocal variety as being raise your voice and talk faster, or slow things down and talk with a more, and yes, that does fall into the realm of vocal variety. But what we want to also ask you to take a look at is the whole concept of, is it what you say or is it how you say it? And and those of us who have been in that parental position are very knowledgeable about the proverbial, yeah, go ahead, go play in the street, see what happens then. Knowing that it's more of how we're saying it than what we're saying. And again, those of us who've ever been in a relationship also know that it's how we say things that oftentimes carry the greater weight than what specifically we're saying. So that's one of the keys to this vocal variety. The other thing is that as you're doing you're creating your presentation, think about a repetitive theme. We have 2 videos that we've embedded in this for you. We don't have time to show them tonight, but if you have an interest, then please pull them up. One's 10 minutes long and one's 7 minutes long. But you'll find in those videos that there's a reoccurring theme, a repetitive theme. And in the first one, it's complicated. In the second one, it's still standing. And if you're still not sure what I'm talking about, then I have a dream. We'll kind of sum it up for you. Okay. The last thing that we want to talk about under this idea of vocal variety is one that has been really tough for me, and that is slow down. Slow down. One of the things that we find in these effective presentations is that when we provide the audience with a particular concept or a thought, we have to give them time to digest it. And so often we're speaking so quickly because we want to get so much information in a limited time that we're go, 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 go. And we don't give people the opportunity to actually digest some of the things that we're giving them. And so it's real critical that we slow down in our presentation process. The second key to successful presentation is presence. And what we mean by presence is there's a concept known as anchoring. And with anchoring, what we're doing is we're physically moving to a particular position in the room or a position at the lectern. And we're providing the audience something unique at that position. It may be we're giving them factual information there, or we're telling a joke there, or if stories are part of your presentation, we're doing storytelling there. And then we will move back over to another position and change what it is we're presenting. So if you have jokes and stories in your presentation, so you might go to the left-hand side and do a story, you might move then to the right and tell a joke, or give facts, or something completely different. And as you anchor your audience to these positions in the room, what you're going to find, and I know this, this sounds kind of voodoo-ish, but what you're going to find is by simply moving to that position in the room, if that is the position where you tell stories, people will sit back and relax because they know a story's coming and they want to hear the story. And then as you shuffle back over to the other side, if it's a joke you're telling and you tell them in that, they'll get a smile on their face just waiting for the next joke. It's absolutely phenomenal that if we anchor people to these positions in the room, that they really help to support our presentation and the effectiveness of it, okay? So one of the things that you can do is if you're in a position like we're in right now, you can change how you sit. You can change, you can look to another position off microphone or off camera. You can do multiple different things. You can focus on a single person if you're in an audience, and that will give you the same effect as moving to a different part of the room. Okay? I even had a colleague that went to the extent that they set up stools at the front of the room and they would change their presentation and actually move from stool to stool. It was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And for those who don't have the stools, one of my colleagues used hats, and he would just put on a hat when he was talking about a particular aspect of his topic, and then he'd put on a different hat if he was talking about a different one. It's just giving people the opportunity to make those changes in the presentation. And the last thing we want to talk about as keys to a successful presentation is the idea of emphasis. Use your movements to support your presentation. Use your movements to support your presentation. What we oftentimes find, and I'm sure you've seen this multiple times, is that people will be rocking. They're rocking back on their heels because it almost is kind of relaxing to them in a very tense situation. But that does little to support your presentation, and at times can actually be somewhat annoying. The other one is hand wringing. When people are nervous, they have a tendency to wring their hands or play with their hands or whatever, but it's not helping your presentation. So we want the emphasis in our movements to be there to help us to get our point across. If you're talking about choking, then let's choke. Do what you need to do. If you're talking about love or heartfelt, then put your hand up on your heart. It's heartfelt. Either one of them. But what you have to do is allow your movements to support what it is you're talking about. Okay? Don't just move because it makes you comfortable. Move because it supports what it is you're saying. And you're going to find this in our second presentation. You're going to find this in our second. You ever have a phone ring in the middle of a presentation? So what you're going to do is you're going to see in the second presentation, you're going to see where the speaker actually makes a hand movement to describe still standing. And she does that every time. Okay? All right. One other thing I want to talk about as far as presentations go, or I'm sorry, talk about emphasis goes, is one of the concepts that we have, and I think it's a real critical one, is make your movements dramatic. As they say, go big or go home. Take your presentation and make people watch it. Do something big. Get people's attention. If we're just up there hand wringing and we're hand wringing throughout our, then it doesn't mean anything. But we want to have those movements that are valuable to us. Okay? Good deal. Okay, last item, emphasis. Make them wait. This one drives me nuts, but I have found it to be incredibly effective. Make them wait. And one of the things that I do to keep myself on track with this is whenever I'm introduced as a speaker, I will walk up to the lectern. I'll put my notes down. I'll pull out a pair of glasses and I'll put a pair of glasses on. I'll take them off and then I'll move around the lectern to start my presentation. It slows me down. It helps me catch my breath. It helps me to get focused on my presentation rather than the walk or run or whatever up to the lectern. But the most important part of that is that the audience is going to be looking at you and saying, what's he waiting on? And the idea is you want 100% of your audience's attention before you ever start. And one of the best ways to do that is make them wait. Stand up there and make them give you their undivided attention before you ever start. And then when you start off with a bang. And that will help to keep them throughout your presentation. Okay. Let's go to our mapping presentation delivery. There's two types of maps that we want to take a look at. One is an auditory map. How do you sound? And one is a visual map. How does it look? Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So when you're assessing a presentation using mapping, this is going to be this is going to be kind of freaky for you. It really is. So, you know, just be ready for it. The first thing we want you to do is just watch the presentation. No sound. Just watch it and see if you can make some determination on what's important and what isn't. What's the speaker saying and what they're not saying? The second thing then is, and this is worse than the first, just listen with no video. Just listen to the presentation. Now, we're a little more accustomed to just listening, books on tape, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but when you're listening, don't listen to the content. Listen to the speaker as they highlight, as they make adjustments, the vocal variety, the emphasis on particular parts of their presentation. And then watch and listen to it again. Okay? Now, the two that we've provided for you, again, the first one's 10 minutes. It's probably the lesser of the two videos. The second one is about 7 minutes, but it is an international champion speaker. And she will just blow you away. unbelievable presentation. The first one is a little bit more homegrown. It's a local presentation in a relatively small room, about 20, 30 people. So you get a little bit different feel. You may have been in that kind of environment, but I encourage you to watch both of them. Next slide, please. Okay, so Sheree and I have provided for you 2 of these maps. This is a presentation for your visual map. And as you can see on the far left side, the content, the concepts, 3 to 5 concepts that you want to get across from your content. And then what I want you to do is then identify where in the room you want to be when you're delivering this. Where do you want to be? And then what gestures do you want to use to emphasize this particular content? Again, if it has something to do with, whatever, consider a hand gesture or an arm gesture or flailing or whatever you want to use that's going to help you deliver that particular piece of content. Okay? And then you do that for each of those concepts. All right? Okay, next slide, please. So this is our presentation mapping then with the auditory. All right, the voice part of it. Again, your content's on the far left, but what voice inflection might you use? Do you want to talk a little bit faster at this particular point? Or do you want to slow your voice down to make a major emphasis? Pauses. Nothing helps you to emphasize better than a well-placed pause. In the one video, you'll see where the speaker says, it's complicated. And there'll be a pause before and a pause after to even emphasize more this particular piece of content. It's complicated. And that really draws people in. The last item on this one is relatability. And this is a little bit, this is going to be very individual for you, this relatability. For some people, it's strictly humor. Okay, and you're going to see in the second video where this speaker really adds a nice piece of humor that everyone kind of relaxes about. Repeating a cliche can be something that helps you to relate here. One of that I that I get a kick out of is, hey, we're from the government and we're here to help. Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, you're believable. I'm from Canton, Ohio. Pro Football Hall of Fame, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And one of the things that we say there is, what? They call soccer football? No. I live in Wilmington, North Carolina. The Civil War is not the Civil War. It is the War of Northern Aggression. Of course it is. Whatever. Okay, so if these kind of things can help you to connect the relatability to your audience. I love to use stories. And so if you're a storyteller, then try to incorporate something about your audience in your story. And that really kind of connects to that relatability. Okay? All right. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the first video. Now, again, this is a very small, about 20, 30 people, very tight room, runs about 10 minutes. If you're a health professional, then you might really get a kick out of the title and the information. Gotta love the guy's hairdo. Come on. Okay, next slide, please. That one runs about 10 minutes, by the way. This one here is a must-see. It is a must-see. Ramona Smith is a killer. Oh my goodness gracious, does she do a phenomenal job. And you're going to see so many of these techniques that we talk about. She demonstrates them really to the T. This one runs about 5 to 7 minutes, and I think you'll really enjoy it if you have a few minutes to take a look at it. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the challenge that we have for you. All right? Accept your challenge. Video yourself. Real easy to do. Take your iPhone, whatever phone, and set it up there and do your presentation. Okay. And then when you want to assess the delivery of your presentation with mapping. If you want to do the first one with just content, great. And then go through and lay your maps out of what you're going to do visually, what you're going to do auditorily, and then make those moves and see how they look. See if they're doing what it is that you want them to do. Okay? And the one thing that I can say to you unequivocally is that success leaves clues. And so as academicians, we're oftentimes going and looking through the literature. Do so for public speaking. Toastmasters, TED Talks, marvelous ways to take a look at speaking skills and how to be a much more effective presenter. Really fantastic. And somebody had asked us before about well, what does this have to do with webinars? Shri and I are putting together our next presentation, which is going to be mapping webinars. So how can we use this format to improve the success of your presentation? Hey, thanks for spending time with us this evening. Have a great rest of your day. Christy, back to you.